Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to today's webinar discussion hosted by the team here at Clipbook. We're really excited for today's conversation. We'll go ahead and jump right in. Tyler, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, awesome. We'll start with some quick introductions. To introduce myself, my name is Adam Joseph. I'll be your host today. I'm the founder and CEO here at Clipbook. At Clipbook, we are the leading AI platform for communications and public relations teams. Since our launch a couple of years ago, we've grown to support over 200 enterprises globally. And again, really excited for the conversation today for a number of reasons. Today, we're going to be talking about the rise of founder-led storytelling and how to build an owned media empire, an owned media engine, and why storytelling has become one of the most powerful growth levers that you can pull as a business, and what it really takes to build that category defining brand. And honestly, with Tyler Denk here joining us today, I think there's nobody better out there to speak to this topic in some detail. So really excited. For those of you who don't know Tyler is the founder and CEO of beehiiv, the newsletter and content platform that's powering some of the biggest creators and companies online. Prior to starting beehiiv, Tyler was employee number 2 at Morning Brew, where he helped build out the growth engine behind what is now one of the most successful digital media companies of the last decade. In the last 4 years, Tyler has taken beehiiv from zero to a $200+ million valuation, over 30 million in ARR. And along the way, I think he's really become one of the most followed tech founders on LinkedIn and more broadly. All to say, we're in for a really insightful, engaging conversation. So let's get started. To our audience, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions throughout the conversation, drop your questions using the Zoom Q&A function. We'll see those as they come in, and I'll field those for Tyler as well. So, okay, before we kind of jump into our topic for the webinar, Tyler, you've had an amazing journey. Would love to start from the top. Would love to hear your personal introduction. Tell us a bit about the journey that brought you to beehiiv.
Yeah, I feel like you did a pretty good job with that introduction, so I'll try not to be too repetitive here. Yeah, I grew up in Baltimore, went to University of Maryland, studied mechanical engineering, self-taught software developer. After graduating, moved to my parents' house. Couldn't get a job because the company I started in college failed, and I was a self-taught developer with no internship experience. So started just building projects at home, and that led me to meeting. I grew up with Austin Reef, who's one of the co-founders of Morning Brew, and they did not have an engineer. They had a lot of ambitious projects to build, and was fortunate enough that he took a chance on me, and I built something that worked. He gave me more work that turned into a full-time job, and that turned into me being the second employee at Morning Brew. There, I ran product engineering and growth. I built the content management system team for our writers to create the newsletters. I built the ad management platform for our sales team to monetize the newsletters. I built all of the ad creative, built the funnels, helped scale the actual newsletter. When I joined, we had about 100,000 subscribers, scaled it to over 4 million readers, up into the acquisition by Business Insider. So that's my journey there. Incredible experience. And I left Morning Brew, joined YouTube for a quick 10-month stint. During my time at YouTube, I was really spending nights and weekends building beehiiv. During my time at Morning Brew, the impetus was we had received so much feedback from readers that they wanted the same newsletter capabilities that we had built, whether it was the design of the template, the deliverability, the referral program, the growth mechanism. They wanted what we had. And as kind of the architect behind building all of that, I knew how to build it and saw that there was a huge gap in the market for everyone wanting to be Morning Brew for X, whether X is crypto, AI, business, politics. And I built a lot of that internal Morning Brew infrastructure. So me and my two co-founders, who were both two software engineers at Morning Brew, left, started beehiiv in the summer of 2020, side project nights and weekends, raised capital in 2021. And then, as you mentioned, we're at about 35 million ARR today. Should do 50 million in revenue this year, about 4 years into the business. And yeah, I do a little bit of product and founder-led marketing along the way. And I guess that's helped build the reputation that you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more. I want to dig into the experience of Morning Brew in particular. Morning Brew putting out some of the best content out there. It was really an amazing 0 to 1 story, especially with the acquisition by Business Insider. What was like the bullseye of what made Morning Brew so compelling as a business? What were some of your learnings from that? And in particular, I'm curious about the content strategy that Morning Brew really leaned into and how that fits in vis-a-vis the broader newsletter ecosystem. You look at Semaphore and Puck and Axios and some of these newsletter first, content companies and publishers.
Yeah, I think Morning Brew stood on the shoulder of giants in the way, one, quite literally, the actual news outlets like the New York Times and Bloomberg and everyone that were doing the true journalism work And then also the Skim, which had come before us. And I think both Alex and Austin took a ton of inspiration from the Skim. The Skim was the target demographic were women, 20s, 30s, interested in news, but didn't want to read the large articles. And they would synthesize them and make them more interesting as a quick like skim, which is where they got the name from. Morning Brew took a similar approach, which is a lot of people are and should be interested in business news and pop culture and other things that are happening around and tangential to the business world. Reading their thesis was reading the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal is very dense. And this new mechanism of delivering news, which was the newsletter, it's been around for a while, but I think the Skim really normalized it in this demographic of you can
Yeah,
spend 5 minutes in getting everything you need to know in a single email. And so Morning Brew built on that strategy. So there's something around the format, there's something around the actual content in which the way that they would describe it is they wanted it to be like your best friend that was explaining to you what was happening in the business world. So it was very conversational. It was funny. It had pop culture references. It would reference some movie that just came out last week, but tie it into the Fed raising rates somehow. And they were very clever and creative in being able to create that content. With that, because they had such an interesting spin on creating that content, it built this brand affinity of people looking forward to and aligning and being proud of saying that they've read Morning Brew, which I think really was the tailwind for a lot of our growth. If you can build a brand that people actually are proud of, and we can incentivize people to refer that newsletter to millions of other people, that's really what created that flywheel to help us scale quicker.
that's great. And tell us more about the content strategy with Morning Brew. You built and helped build really the growth engine for the business. What about the quality of the content? You touched on this in some sense, right? Like hey, it's your best friend explaining very complex topics to you. What else? What were some of the things that really made Morning Brew so compelling? People were opening it, they're reading it, they're addicted to the content. Yeah, what did you find really worked?
Yeah, we always used to say push first, pull, and pull would be expecting consumers to go to techcrunch.com and scroll down and find articles and read them. So you had to actually pull them into your ecosystem, which is the way that most of these media companies operated. The
Mhm.
whole value of newsletters were it was push media, which is your consumers and your readers have to open their inbox every morning. They're using their inbox for work. They're using inbox for purchasing things and receipts and information and newsletters. And so if you can meet your reader where they already are and where they have to go, you're pushing content to them rather than expecting to pull them into your ecosystem. And I think that's something that a lot of media companies have obviously woken up to. So there's something around that. There's something around the conversational tone and adding humor into business news, which like Wall Street Journal, like I also read the Wall Street Journal. It doesn't make you laugh a ton. So like really being able to hit on like humor and entertainment as a part of packaging this business news. And then I'd say and then brevity, right? Like the fact that two things, brevity and the reliability or like the frequency of which it comes. So it was habit forming in that it shows up in your inbox at 6 a.m. every morning. And
Mhm.
to be on the subway in New York City, heading to work and being able to get a download of everything that's happening in the business world so you can sound smart around the water cooler with your boss or in a job interview and actually enjoying consuming that content. I think that was kind of the sweet spot across all of those vectors that made it work.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, okay, so you're at Morning Brew, you're starting to think about, okay, do I want to do something else? Eventually, we're at YouTube, that started beehiiv. I find that like founders, when they just, decide to make the jump, they like have, I think, a couple things in place. One is they have some earned insight into the end market that they're serving, right? Where they have a unique vantage point that give them some information, some edge that, was really compelling. One. And then two is that they have probably some personal identity in the category, right? Where they really understand the user, they kind of see themselves, very philosophically, spiritually, emotionally, like close to them. So, I mean, I just, all to say, I would love to kind of hear from you, like, what was the catalyst to start beehiiv specifically? What were some of the problems that you were seeing in the broader creator economy or otherwise that you really wanted to solve? And why were you really compelled personally to really go do that?
Yeah, I alluded to this a bit in my brief overview, realizing now I maybe went into too much detail for my introduction. But yeah, so the thinking there was the amazing thing about newsletters is you can hit reply and you can get in contact with the person who sent the newsletter. And at Morning Brew, at the scale of millions of readers, we would have tens of thousands of responses some week. And one of our core advantages, which funny, there's a through line to like how I operate beehiiv today, is like always listening to customer feedback. I respond to everyone who tweets at me on X. and post on LinkedIn. Like that's where I get a lot, like one sentiment of like users and the ecosystem, but also how we can improve the product and how we build our roadmap. Going all the way back to Morning Brew, like we actually had the writers reading everything in the inbox because like that's how they got better. It was what story didn't resonate, what was too political, where did we have a blind spot in covering this topic where it didn't resonate with the audience. Eventually, at the scale of millions, we had interns reading through the inbox and they would basically forward to the right person. So whether it was the managing editor, like, hey, you took too hard of a political stance on this story, and like a lot of people did not like it, and feeding that. But a lot of it was people who were either journalists or writers at other companies or hobbyists who wanted to build a newsletter. And they opened Morning Brew every morning and they saw the newsletter looks great. It's delivered well. Like it's always hitting my primary inbox. They are clearly growing super quickly because they mentioned their growth numbers. They have this referral program, which has incentivized me as a reader to share it with like my parents and my family and my friends. So they've clearly
Mhm.
cracked this newsletter code. And a lot of
Right.
these people would reply, how did you build the referral program? How did you format the newsletter? How are you rendering well in Yahoo and Outlook and Gmail? What data are you looking at to scale the newsletter? And those questions would be forwarded to me. And I don't have the ability to answer hundreds of emails every day. But that was really the impetus and the seed of what we had built at Morning Brew actually was special. And the answer also wasn't, oh, we use X platform. The truth was we used X platform, but built 15 things around it that are all custom to us. So
Mhm.
where most of these readers wanted a simple answer was, where did you build that referral program? They wanted me to say, we use X. So just like a product recommendation. The truth was I built X and we've integrated with like five other things. And so
Yeah.
that's where I think it became very obvious that what we had built was special and that me being the architect behind a lot of that had a lot of insight that could really productize this and bring it to a much larger market.
Hmm. So tell me about like was there a moment where you were like, all right, I'm starting this company. I'm gonna call it Beehive. We're gonna start to, raise some capital. Or yeah, like t tell us about like the first step that you took and what that looked like.
I think first step was realizing, well, first step was realizing what I had just explained and pitching it to Alex and Austin that like, hey, Morning Brew should sell this software. Like I've already done the hard part of building it once for us. Can we, right now, our users are like the 40-person team. I'd like it to be 40 million people. We have massive distribution. Why don't we sell this as a software product? To
Hmm.
their pro con who knows, but like they were already talking about getting acquired by Business Insider.
Right.
And I would imagine it'd be quite the curveball to throw in mid process and diligence that you're also a SaaS platform and going into a new market. So they were
Right.
kind of like, that's a cute idea, but like we're like not interested in becoming a SaaS platform. And and then me and my now two co-founders were all engineers on the team. And I think engineers want to build for millions of people. Like if you're going to put the effort in to build something, it's cool to have a few close people using it. It's much cooler to have a few million people using your software and benefiting from it. So we had always talked about like, hey, this would be really cool to productize.
Yeah.
I think when I left Morning Brew, it took me 1 week. I actually got COVID the week after I left Morning Brew. And so I was actually stranded in my Brooklyn apartment with no job and not, well, I haven't started my new job yet, but so no work to do. And I'm not someone who can sit still. So I actually just called my now co-founder, Ben, and kind of convinced him like, hey, I think we should be building this company that we'd always talked about. He thought I was crazy. He just spent 3 years building this tech. He's like, there's no way we can just build this us two in the next couple of months. So we recruited a third, which is our third co-founder, Jake. And I convinced them step by step that it was a worthwhile endeavor, which kicked off 10 months of like probably the most high stress 10 months of my life for a
Yeah.
few reasons. One, I think anyone who's ever had an idea, you immediately after the excitement is the anxiety that someone's going to take that idea or that one of the other millions of
Yeah.
competitors are going to get to market before you. For
Yeah.
us, like the email space is massive. And our thesis was that we could bring a referral program which helps users grow, which was like proprietary to Morning Brew, but make that an add-on that came with the platform. And that was something that any of these competitors could have just launched a referral program because we talked about it all the time at Morning Brew. And that was like our initial wedge into the market, and it would be totally gone. So for 10 months, we had this anxiety of waking up that any of these competitors would do that. The
Yeah.
other anxiety is like me and my two co-founders, like we were coworkers, we're not like best friends. We're not totally aligned in life. They both got married fairly early. And like
Mhm.
priorities shift. So at any day, they could have been like, Ben could have been like, hey, I just got a promotion. I'm getting paid a shit ton. Like, I'm not going to leave and start this company. So you're kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out where you want to spend weekends building it because that gets you closer to this. But then there's like half of you that's like, what am I spending my Saturday night building for? We have no customers, no revenue, and this could fall apart tomorrow. So you're just kind of on the edge always. And then I would say, I mean, I immediately violated my non-solicit, my non-compete, and with both of them. And so I woke up every day terrified that we were going to get sued and just like basically dead
Is this
on
with
arrival
YouTube or with Morning Brew?
with his morning brew. Like I
Okay.
left morning brew and the next week I already called, like there was only three engineers remaining and I called two of them and tried to convince them to start this company. And so that ruined the relationship with Alex and Austin.
The Business Insider General Counsel isn't listening to this webinar.
This is long gone, but yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and that was my worry. I was like, one, I know Alex and Austin are going to be super pissed at me, which they were. But I was like, that's actually not even their company anymore. Like, it's now owned by a much larger org, and so like they might not even be the decision maker. So that was my mental state. Like, I mean, my mental state hasn't been all that great for the past 5 years, but like that was like how it started. Was thinking every morning that we were going to get either sued out of existence or that a competitor was going to make it totally moot to even build this, or that anything else could happen to make this reality not come to fruition. And that was a really stressful period of my life.
Yeah. I mean, that's going from 0 to 1, but here you are at 30 plus and, are like decidedly one of the most disruptive, innovative, like exciting companies in the category. So, tell me like maybe just especially for those who, have not maybe seen beehiiv or might be still on, on Substack or a different platform or, running their newsletter through MailChimp or whatever it is. Do you want to maybe like give us the like introduce beehiiv, what is your vision for the company? What do you do now? Where are you going from here?
Yeah, for sure. So we started off as Morning Brew in a Box. It was we want to be the best at newsletters.
Mhm.
You can design a newsletter, customize it however you want, send it. We have tools to make you grow faster, which is the referral program that we built at Morning Brew, built into the product, which was our core thesis. We built a recommendation network. And then the other thesis is, can we help you monetize? And this was really our big bet. What I saw up close and personal at Morning Brew was we had a team of 20 sellers talking to agencies and brands, which is how we would get sponsorships in the newsletter across our portfolio of newsletters. Then I looked at the ecosystem on Substack and on Twitter, and there's a lot of independent writers who are writing about sports and politics where they're amazing at writing about sports. They have no interest in talking to Nike to get a brand sponsorship, but like that's how they would be able to monetize and be able to
Yeah.
scale their business. And so Substack kind of came into the market and normalized that the only way to monetize content is paid subscriptions. And I
Yeah.
thought that was bullshit from the beginning. We do it and we support it. And we actually are doing millions of dollars of transactions per month. And we don't take a cut of revenue, which is a big counter positioning for us, as
Yeah.
opposed to Substack and Patreon and most creator platforms that take a cut of revenue, 10 to 15%. We don't take a dollar from any of our users.
Yeah.
So we support that. But I thought it was bullshit. That's the only way to make money with content on the internet. For decades, the most common way is through ads. And
Yeah.
but I knew that that sports writer or politics writer could not or should not spend their valuable time doing anything but creating content and definitely not doing brand partnerships. So the beehiiv ad network was always a thesis of can we do what YouTube did for video, but for email and bring all of these brands. Today we have Nike, Netflix, Roku, HubSpot, like really premium brands that are sponsoring these newsletters, which in turn makes these newsletters generate more revenue, which means that they can invest that income into growing faster, into maybe going from a part-time project to a full-time project, and then building and creating more content. So that was like our core thesis, which is let's do best-in-class newsletter software, help them grow faster, help them monetize more, and not have this predatory take rate, and let them generate revenue unopinionated however they want. What
Yeah.
we learned is a lot, and we learned this from the Morning Brew days as well. Morning Brew was such a well-oiled machine across all of these different product vectors. And so we gave users a newsletter product and they said, I want a beautiful website to host my newsletter. So people can discover it online, they can sign up. And so we built a website builder and then eventually acquired a website builder that's now been folded into the product. So now you can create a custom website. You can go to my newsletter, mail.bigdeskenergy.com and see like the different types of customization you can do. So now we had newsletter and website. Then when you launched a website and people were getting traffic, people were like, well, now that I have this website, I want to sell things. I want to sell a product, a course, a template, a guide, coaching. And so we kept expanding the surface area where last year we launched digital products, which allow you to do everything I just said. So you can sell your expertise online. Again, where most products charge 10 to 15% take rate, we charge 0%. So it is more creator friendly as a platform. And then as we continued to scale our surface area and users became to trust us of we build very quality product and we ship very fast, we listen to user needs and we're actually trying to solve their problems more than any other company, much quicker than any other company. That has allowed us to also ship podcasts. So you can host, distribute, and monetize your podcast directly on beehiiv. And then last week we launched community as well. So you can launch a full community where your audience interacts, engages, DMs with each other, messages, host events, etc. So we've kind of evolved from like a newsletter only platform to a newsletter platform plus this ecosystem of everything you would need to build a successful content business.
Yeah, that's amazing. And a lot of the folks on this call right now work in communications teams at big companies, right? And they're CCOs, they're VPs of comms, they're working with chief executives, with kind of key stakeholders, really thinking quite a bit about how do they enable a really strong owned media engine? What does that mean for the storytelling strategy and thesis for the broader brand and the broader company? I do want to ask you about a term that you coined, I think famously called story maxing, which I love that phrase. For folks who haven't come across that, can you just tell us a bit about like what is story maxing? What does that mean for you? How do you put it into practice at beehiiv?
Yeah, super dumb term that I just named one of my newsletters, but it was around the thesis that a lot of these companies who are not media companies have invested in creating content. And everyone from Rippling, Chime, Plaid, Vanta are basically hiring like head of storytellers. I think last December or last November, the New York Times wrote an article that Vanta is hiring a head of storyteller for $250,000. And that went
Yeah.
viral on X of people like kind of ridiculing it and being like, what the hell is a head of storytelling? But I actually think it speaks to a much larger trend.
Going higher. I mean, the foundational labs are paying, half a
So
million,
much.
really strong. Yeah, it's like it's crazy. It's insane. They're like staffing full, owned media teams
I
to
mean,
really,
OpenAI bought TBPN, right?
yeah,
So for hundreds of millions allegedly.
yeah.
So yeah, I
Um,
think they're investing
yeah.
in like the narrative and stories that they're putting out there. I think it's based off of a few different themes. One is distribution is becoming the bottleneck. Paid spend has continued to get more and more expensive across Google and Meta. SEO has been more commoditized and search is also decreasing, and it's less difficult to break out from search.
Mhm.
Social has evolved from a place where you used to be follower based. And if you had 100,000 followers, roughly 100,000 people should see your content, where now it's algorithmically based, where you might have 100,000 followers, but maybe only 5% of those people ever see the content you post on
Yeah.
Instagram or X. It's harder to reach your audience. I think there's a thesis that people follow people, not features or faceless brands. And we see that, and the example I always give is like Brian Chesky at Airbnb, like same exact launch announcement, one from the Airbnb account, one from Brian's account. And like all things being equal, like normalizing based on followers, he 100x the engagement because people actually want to hear from a person and Brian rather than like this faceless brand. There's this like confluence of like now that AI has become so prevalent, anyone that has access to ChatGPT or Claude or even like these video things can like create content that looks and feels good, directionally good. So there's a real premium on excellence rather than just like the slop that's being created. And then I think that also moves the conversation towards trust, where it's you trust people or brands over just like any sort of like slop that's showing up in your feed. And when you put that all together, you can kind of see why there's a premium being put on quality storytelling, which I
Mhm.
think founder-led marketing is like one of the many flavors of that, which is hearing directly from a person who has some sort of expertise, who is doing content that's slightly different than you would be able to get from like asking ChatGPT or any of these LLMs. And so that's kind of like a long summation of like the thesis around story maxing. It's really just companies waking up to like, in order to get in front of your customers reliably and build this trust and narrative, you have to be doing more than like the average. And like the bar has been raised with everything that I just mentioned.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Tyler, you in your own right are quite the storyteller and influencer kind of within this category. You have 130,000 plus subscribers to your newsletter. You have 72,000 plus followers on LinkedIn. I actually did the math about 4.5 times as many LinkedIn followers as I have, but who's fucking counting? And tell us a bit about like, well, one, why you've clearly invested into this function, this capability for you, for beehiiv. So curious as to what's catalyzed that. But also just tactically, like how did you do it, right? What advice do you have for the chief communications officer right now who's trying to get their CEO to do the same thing in their company?
Yeah, I think it's worth calling out that when I first started back in 2020, I think I had like 3 or 4,000 followers on Twitter and like probably the same amount on LinkedIn. So I didn't come from like a background of being a content creator, and I still don't really consider myself a content creator, and definitely not a background of like having a large base.
Yeah.
So obviously there's time and effort put into it. And if I put more, I've actually just started taking it more seriously. I'd say even like the past like 18 months. If I had taken it as seriously as I am now, maybe 5 years ago, I think I'd be much further along on this journey. I think it started when in 2020, when I was just building this as a side project, I started sharing updates of like features or things we were building or things that I was excited about building a company. And
Mhm.
I just found this like pocket of Twitter that was like startup founder Twitter, where people were constantly engaging with the content, like following along with that journey. And I think what that did was it was just like a reinforcement of, hey, we launched this and like 50 people would like it. And they showed some level of interest and they were responding. And so I had this like little community of founders. And then when we launched, we had 500 likes and people were engaging and super excited and signing up for the product. So I was like, okay, me sharing it like transparently what we're building and how we're thinking about the business has clearly caught the attention of other startup adjacent people. And like, we need customers. We don't have money. We just raised like a small seed round. And at that point, no seed round. And so I viewed creating content organically as an initial funnel to get people in. I think since I've thought about it in like two buckets, one is altruistically, the content I create is extremely transparent of how we're building the business, how we're hiring, how we raise capital, how we run our meetings, how we do our feature launches. The thinking is, I think a lot of founders are gatekeepers of what works. And I think the world's a better place if there's more people building things. And if there were more people sharing the secrets of how to scale a successful company, more successful companies will be created. And so I'd like to be a voice and someone who can actually share what works and what doesn't, hoping it inspires and helps other founders. So like that's the altruistic thing, which is like very real and very legit. The other one is like as I create more content about fundraising, it's not just about newsletters, but it's about anyone who's interested in business or entrepreneurship. And there's a
Yeah.
very wide market of people. And I believe in increasing the luck surface area. Like it is so hard to build a startup. The more people that I can have under my tent who knows about us and is vouching for us because they resonate with the content that I create, the better.
Yeah.
And when they're at a dinner party and someone mentions that they are thinking about launching a newsletter and they can say, hey, like I follow someone who started this newsletter company, like you only get there by building goodwill and providing valuable content and helping others. And so
Yeah.
we have got a lot of business from this founder-led marketing motion. And so it's kind of two sides of the same coin, essentially.
Yeah, that's great. And so tell me, what is the process that you go through, the working process to identify the stories that are actually worth telling, right? And you have your LinkedIn feed, you could post however many times a week. Like, what do you decide? How do you go through the working process to actually generate that content? And what do you prioritize? What do you deprioritize? What actually works? And yeah, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, my sickness is that I work pretty much 24/7. So I'm always kind of, even when I'm in the gym or swimming laps in the morning, like I'm thinking about the business, different meetings, different strategies, different things we can be doing.
Yeah,
I'll have a takeaway from a meeting where we uncover some new growth strategy that's working really well for us. And that will inspire me to write about it because I think other people could benefit from like this insight that's not beehiiv specific, but is more widely applicable to different cohorts of founders and whatnot. A lot of my content, like LinkedIn and X, have gotten easier for me as I started writing the news. Like the newsletter is the hard part because it's 1,500 words and it's like a true essay that I am very particular about. Like edit, like it takes me 5 to 6 hours a week. It's like my weekend every week,
yeah,
and I put a lot of effort into creating a good draft and then making edits and then rereading it
yeah,
5 times and then adding images and really tweaking it to make it my own. But once I've done that, usually I can create like 3 to 4 posts on like social just from the themes and content that I've already created from the newsletter. So I think the newsletter is the engine between a lot of it. And I also like, as calculated as that feels, I don't overthink it. Like I really shoot from the hip like 90% of the time. If I have a thought that I think is even somewhat interesting, I try to carve out a few minutes to poke at it and build it out and create something that I can share with others. And it's usually the ones that I think the least about that perform the best. I think when I over engineer, like this is like some sort of viral post that people will engage with, it usually comes off as some sort of attempt at trying to create a viral post and it never works out super well.
yeah,
So it's some combination of just always being locked in and thinking about, but it is a muscle. I think until you have the muscle of I think everyone has interesting things and observations that they can and should share, but I think they usually internalize it. I think the muscle is, hey, that's really interesting. I think other people would benefit from that. And like, let me take the leap to convert interesting insight into something that I can package and share with others. And that takes, I think, time to build that muscle.
Yeah. And how do you get to the first step of building that muscle? So let's say you're, let's just theoretically say you're the chief communications officer, or the CEO of a company that has not historically done any storytelling, right? Does not have any own media, has not been posting, on their LinkedIn channels, doesn't have a newsletter. Step one, what do you do?
Yeah, I'd almost say there's like two completely different paths to take, kind of like pick your poison. One would be like the lowest effort, shoot from the hip, like just do something. And
Yeah.
like I've always found X is great at that. Like that's where I found my footing. Like I came to LinkedIn like 2 years after X, and like now I kind of just post the same thing on both platforms because they're slightly different audiences. But X is like made as like this quick hitter, like short snippet, just like shoot from the hip and get thoughts out.
Mhm.
That's where I found my groove in being able, and it feels like it can be a lot less polished. And I think you should be less polished there. So that's one angle of just building that muscle. The completely other on the side of the like effort spectrum is like newsletters are just such an incredible place to like get your thoughts down in a more concerted effort and craft the message that you want. And
Mhm.
like I know so many people that have a 500 person newsletter that it's changed their life because they're like they do consulting and they have the right 500 people in this list that they can talk about the different projects they've worked on and they can book a $100,000 a year consulting gig off of one newsletter. And like
Yeah.
whether that's for the purpose of revenue or to get new business as a CEO of some company, I think getting your thoughts out on paper helps a lot. So again, two totally different strategies. One takes a lot more time and effort, but I think there's like a bigger payoff potentially. The other one's just like to get the motion of creating content.
Yeah. It's funny. A few weeks ago, we had Peter Walker from Carta, Peter Walker, the head of insights at Carta, on one of our webinars here at Clipbook. And, I asked him the same question. And he said, honestly, number one piece of advice is just start posting. Like literally, we were talking about LinkedIn specifically. He was just like, commit that you're going to write 4 posts a week, right? Or 5 posts a week. And it doesn't matter what happens, hit send on a post, and you will start to see, in real time the type of feedback you get on that content, right? You'll see okay, what performed well, what didn't. You'll start to adjust kind of organically and naturally around some of the content that really, resonates with your audience. And so I thought that was super helpful. And I think to your point too, I mean, you had what did we say, 130,000 subscriber, newsletters, but depending on what business you run, right, or who your audience is, like those key stakeholders might actually be, much smaller, much more salient kind of group of stakeholders, right? If you're communicating with, yes, 100 or 500 people, right? They may be the most important stakeholders in your ecosystem. So communicate with them and work with them and so on and so forth. So anyways, I think point is very well taken across both fronts. I'd be curious, the world is changing right now, right? Media is changing, the information landscape and the information space is more fragmented, it's more complex than ever. What are some of the trends that you have, top of mind for 2026 and how media is changing and how CCOs and marketers more broadly really need to adapt and say the next 6 months?
Yeah, so I tweeted the other week that I think the future of media is the creator, or the other way around. I tweeted that I think the creator economy is the future of media. And I think we're seeing that across so many different vectors. And if you extend even all the way to like considering me a creator as like a founder who's creating content, like that is like our main, like, we have an incredible comms leader at the company. We do traditional press and like do interviews, but like I'd say the most consistent channel of understanding what the company is up to, it comes from me directly.
Yeah.
And so I think that shifting paradigm from the few gatekeepers of large outlets who typically cover stories across tech and media and those different ecosystems to just cutting out the middleman and going direct, whether it's across social or my newsletter. You don't really need to be an investor to get investor rights into the beehiiv. Like if you sign up to my newsletter, you'll know exactly how much revenue we're doing, what's working well, what's not. Like I would argue that the casual subscriber to my weekly newsletter knows more about beehiiv's internal metrics and data than most investors have into these different seed rounds that they've done. And I think that that shift, and granted, it takes like a total alignment. Like we've run the company incredibly transparently. I'm 100% transparent with our employees. They know exactly how much money we're making, what we're burning, what's not working well. Like I would make that all very clear. And I even extend that to users and to anyone who follows me. Like there's no secrets here. And I think that that has actually helped refine our thinking and actually be more performant, knowing that there is a bit of pressure to have to deliver in this very transparent environment. So that's like one, I think I'd say. The other one is it's more creator focused, but I think the most successful creators today are multi-channel. And it's not just YouTubers or newsletter operators or podcasters, but a lot of these successful creators have all three of those, plus a community, plus some course, plus some IRL event. And I think that's also reflected in the roadmap that we've created. Our product reflects that reality that the
Yeah.
most successful people in this ecosystem are multi-channel, and we want to be the place where you can successfully do all of those things without the complexities of tying 6 or 7 different platforms together.
Yeah, I love that. Tyler, I do want to ask you, I know we're approaching time here. This space has been Beehive versus Substack, in particular, and Patreon on some level, for the last like couple of years now. We'd love to just kind of hear, and I've seen some of your LinkedIn posts, like pretty spicy LinkedIn posts about Substack and about the, kind of the monetization model. I would love to just kind of hear from you, like what makes you different? How do you see Substack really evolving? I imagine for some of the folks on this call are actively using Substack and subscribing to newsletters on Substack as well. So yeah, we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that front.
Yeah, obviously a question I've been asked quite a few times, so I have like a pretty robust response to it, but you can be the judge of that. I typically break it up into 3 different things. One is just business model. So Substack and Patreon, for that matter, have a take rate model where they take a percentage between 10 and 15% of everything you earn on the platform. We are a flat rate SaaS model where you pay either on the free plan, which is very generous, $49 a month on the low end, up to a few $100s a month. But it's very predictable SaaS flat rate pricing, which I think is better economics for most content creators. And most businesses who have a take rate model typically only do 1 or 2 things. They make it harder to leave the platform, and there's some level of platform lock-in. And we've seen that from both of those platforms. And then there's increase in take rates because the only way they make more money is by charging more. And so we've seen Patreon go from 7 to 10% take rates. We've seen Etsy go from 4 to 6%. Like all of these businesses that charge on a take rate typically only go in one direction. They don't ever take a revenue haircut. And so that's been the playbook there. Two is just like broad features and capabilities. We have a full automation suite. We have an API. We have webhooks. We have a community platform. We have an ad network. Like there is
MCP at the point, I
and,
believe
and an
now.
MCP, a really powerful MCP. And so like I think from like a pure like features and capability standpoint, where they are shifting more towards being a social media platform and going for simpler use case, like we are truly replacing enterprise level software and making it available to consumers at a consumer price point. And that's why we have large enterprises like TechCrunch, Sinclair, Newsweek, Time moving off of enterprise solutions onto us. Like we have very, very advanced capabilities, which we've learned from the Morning Brew days. And so just what you can do on the platform. One is a Ferrari. One is, to their credit, like they don't want it to be that. Like they want to build a social platform and they want it to be simple. And there's trade-offs to both, but we can serve much more sophisticated use cases and content creators. And then the third I'd say is philosophical, which is they are a walled garden closed ecosystem. They are the brand and the aggregator. So you launch a Substack. People say, visit my Substack. They are intermediating between the content creator and the end user in a lot of different ways. They are encouraging readers to download the Substack app, not the Emily Sundberg app. It's the Substack app. And so they have totally intermediated between both parties. We are the tools and infrastructure that like sit invisibly in the background. The Amazon versus Shopify analogy, I think, works really well. So Amazon, they have millions of third-party sellers, but you go to Amazon.com, use the Amazon app. Amazon keeps most of the data. They don't feed it back to the merchants, and it shows up in an Amazon box. Like that is the aggregator. We are very Shopify. We are tools and infrastructure that sits in the background that wants people like Oliver Darcy to build status news. And you don't need to know that it's built on Beehive at all. Like that's not where we get benefit. We succeed when our users succeed and we sit in the background. And I think that philosophical difference shows all like up and down the entire product and is where business decisions and strategy kind of diverges on both platforms.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do want to kind of shift gears to the final kind of section of our webinar today, which is what we call the Derek Lightning Round. At Clipbook, we love to tell a story that's probably familiar to many of the communicators on this call, on this webinar, that every communications team, every PR team, marketing team has some poor 22-year-old intern or associate who at Clipbook we proverbially call Derek. And at Clipbook we worship Derek because he is the poor soul who gets stuck doing all of the manual tasks of the job, right? Whether that's daily research, monitoring, analysis. And we at Clipbook here really exist in part to support Derek, right? And so the next set of questions I have for you, Tyler, we're going to do this as a lightning round. We're going to channel that 22-year-old intern and some of the questions they might ask. So are you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. First, what is the most interny thing you've done in your career, even as a CEO?
I mean, I actually think I make a living off of doing interny things. Like I think why I've been successful in this role is nothing is below me. So whether it's like answering support tickets till midnight, whether it's responding to everything on Instagram, X, and LinkedIn, like I think I do all of like the menial tasks and am not above any of them
Yeah, love that. So just full fucking founder mode, like 24/7. So
24/7.
love it. So what's your, this might be a tough one to answer, but would love to know what's your like favorite newsletter? Who's your favorite content creator? I know it's probably like, picking amongst like who's your favorite child or something with all the content creators that are on Beehive. But if you had to pick a couple that are top of mind, would love to hear it.
So my information diet is that I read probably like 35 newsletters a day.
Okay.
So to avoid picking a favorite child, I'll actually pick someone who's not yet on Beehive. Ben Thompson from Stratechery. I've been reading for probably like 6 or 7 years, but I think it's like a must read for anyone in like tech adjacent fields.
Ben Thompson. Can you tell us who Ben Thompson is? Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think previously worked at Microsoft. He went independent. He's kind of like the newsletter pioneer. He went independent and launched a paid subscription newsletter, I think in
Yep.
2013. So for 13 years, I think it was just him for a while. That has scaled to like 5 million plus in revenue. I think he might have a team of 2 or 3 people now, but it's very small. But he's kind of like paved the way. He is the reason why Substack built Substack. He was like the inspiration of going independent and building a media company that's subscription based as like a
Mhm.
one person shop.
Yeah, that's amazing. Love that. Next question. What's the most memorable, fun, or quirky piece of content that you've written recently?
A lot of them. There's one, I think when I first found out what Lovable and Bolt were, this was like maybe last January. It was like these companies that have been around for 2 months, but like we're doing 25 million in revenue. So this is like at the very beginning of like the vibe coding revolution. I think I wrote like the most unhinged newsletter about like just like what it feels as a founder that's been hustling like all like near death experiences, not literally, but company, and maybe literally, and
Okay.
like clawing my way to like at the time 20 million ARR. And then seeing a company 2 months into their journey hit 20 million ARR and like just the roller coaster of emotions of what that feels like. And it was
Yeah.
just like a straight from the hip, like gut reaction newsletter that was like totally unhinged, but felt great to write and people loved it.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. Last question. If you could put one piece of communications or marketing wisdom on a billboard in Times Square, what would it say?
Yeah, it's probably what you mentioned earlier from the guy from Cardo, like just get started. I think so many people think themselves into a pretzel of like, what if people don't like this content? What if it's not good? Or like one thing that I think I've really championed as like leading product here is like we've shipped so many products that were like a 6 out of 10, knowing that it would get to a 10 out of 10, but we'd get there faster if we just got it in people's hands and iterated quickly based on that feedback. And so like I don't get phased whatsoever by like a bad first impression. Like if it gets us to a final destination better and faster, I will do it. And like when I post things on X and LinkedIn, I'd say half the time I have no idea if it's going to totally flop. And the thing is like I'm totally over worrying about that at all. If it got 4 likes and people hating on it, couldn't care less. And so I think the sooner you can get to like just get started and don't think about others' opinions, the more you can actually dive in and start seeing results.
Yeah, I love that. Tyler Denk, thank you so much for joining us today. It looks like we're just out of time. This was such a treat. Before we run, we just have one final plug. If you were on this call, if you were part of a communications team, a media team, a PR team, we would love to meet you here at Clipbook. We're an AI research and analysis platform for communications teams. Reach out anytime, clipbook.com or adam at clipbook.com. We'll also say Beehive, fantastic platform. We're a client, Beehive as well here at Clipbook. So Tyler, congrats again on your success and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Take care.